Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Second Act Actors. I'm your host, Dr. Janet McMorty, and I'm still a medical doctor simultaneously trying to pursue a career in acting. If you haven't already seen on my social media, I am hosting a charity fundraiser where you can buy lots of swag and merch, and all of the proceeds, 100% of the proceeds, everyone, is going to 5 selected charities. You can learn more about the 5 charities on my website or on my social media. Follow us at Second Act Actors on Instagram. My website is www.secondactactors.com, but the actual fundraiser, I know this is kind of annoying, I don't know tech well, people, is my personal website, so janetmcmordie.com. That is MCMORDIE, MCM or die, get the name right, /store. And you'll see all the information about our charity fundraiser. So buy some merch, support these amazing charities, and merchandising. We gotta love merch. That's a little Spaceballs reference for you, for those of you who have seen that movie. Anyways, on with this week's show. My guest this week is Scott Erwin. Scott is an accountant turned actor, and he has an amazing story. He has a lovely tale of dancing in the Nutcracker with his family, but also has a pretty intense story about a pretty dark time in his life, coming out of that dark time and discovering his creativity and his love of acting. Please enjoy the incredible Scott Erwin. So remind me again, whereabouts are you located? I will usually just cut this out.
I'm located in Central California. So I grew up in Bakersfield, California, known for Buck Owens and Merle Haggard, and Korn came out of Bakersfield, the band Korn.
Yep.
And I like to say I'm from the streets of Bakersfield because that's a good song. And I live in a community just east of there called Lake Isabella. And it's up in the hills of Sierra Nevadas, about an hour away. Beautiful canyon that I drive through every day to get to work. And it's been neat. I lived in Bakersfield for many years and ended up in 2019, my life just crashed and burned around me. I had bought a business in 2016, and it was probably it was a challenging. I bought a job, and I ended up just burning myself out, and just really crashed and burned, and ended up. Part of that was a marriage, and part of that was the business. And I literally was shutting down my business, and as COVID hit. So just as COVID hit, I was sort of in that process of rebooting, I guess. And it really was. It was a reboot. I mean, I was in a dark place as far as, depression-wise and existentially wise, and I began writing about that time, and I started a blog, just posting stuff, mostly just for myself as a personal journal, but and I started this thing called Life is Like Us, and it became a sort of all the things of how life sort of just came out of me. And I was writing a book at the time. So, but I began writing, and then I found a group on the internet that best thing I could call it would be like a training academy. And it was for actors, and I just kind of got into it, and it was really a lifesaver during COVID. Because, we had Zoom. First time I'd been introduced to Zoom, and for most of us anyway, and I was going to classes, several times a week and even a couple times a day sometimes, and meeting actors and directors and writers and um, managers, producers, interacting with all these other creative people, and kind of realized, I think, hey, I think I'm gonna try and be an actor. So that's kind of how my journey started. Um, and then I did that for about a year, and I started kind of putting myself out there, and ended up getting some background jobs, and that's kind of how I got started, through this thing.
Wow. I think your story really resonates with not only me, because I went through a very similar like introduction to the industry, with like time wise being COVID and stuff like that and Zoom. But I think a lot of people, there is kind of this like catalyst, sounds like a dramatic word, but like shift, right? That people go through at some point in their life, that I think you realize, like, what for you was it? For me, it was a lack of creativity and a need for more creativity. Was it that for you, or what was the drive? Like, how did you even seek out something like this acting class?
Um, well, for me, it was a time of, there's a saying, when everything changes, change everything. And um, I was literally living with my 86-year-old father at the time, still do. And I felt like a little bit of a teenager, sort of figuring out myself again. And um, the catalyst kind of led to me questioning what was going on. And when you're sort of rebooting, like I use that term. I was really kind of when you go down to a low place and you start climbing out and exercising and writing, and um, then you begin to go, well, where, if I'm not happy now, where was I happy? What was making, what points in life um, did make me happy? And I looked back at the last decade of my life, and I said, the most fun I had was dancing with my kids on stage. And so, as an accountant, I'm in my head a lot, and you're quiet, and you're not interacting with people. And my kids began dancing years ago, and I volunteered to be the nutcracker in the ballet. They had a pretty big production. And so I look back and I said, I really enjoyed that. And I wonder if I could do that. Is this really something that I could do? And anything's possible with enough education and enough desire to do it. And it's just going to be at what level am I going to get to doing it? If you shoot for the stars, you might make the moon, kind of thing. Well, okay, maybe I won't become Keanu Reeves, but I might be a great character actor, or I might be that uncle or the detective that's always in this thing. And so it really became this desire to explore that, and realize that it made me happy. It was something that I enjoyed doing, performing and being on stage, um, and being fully present, because I what I was doing was about 40 minutes on stage all at one time. So you have to be present, and I did it for 10 years. You have to be present in that moment, engaged with the other actors on stage, the other dancers on stage. And I don't know, there was just something really enjoyable about that process. And so that's kind of where I decided to kind of dig into it and see if I could do it.
Were you a performer growing up?
I was and I wasn't. I when I was growing up, my mom was a part of a women's choir, and I remember being 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, and she'd go to this women's choir, and it was like having a whole bunch of aunts, and they were all these sweet ladies, and some were really, elderly, and some were, it seemed like my mom was one of the younger ones, and I was the only kid that seemed to be there. I don't remember any other kids being drug along to this thing, like we were playing in the hallway. It was just me and these ladies. So my mom and I would sing in the car, and she taught me to harmonize, and then I'd go to these choirs and I'd sing with her, and then I think sort of like a little, pet, they would give me a song and put me on stage with them, and so I remember being 5 years old and singing "I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy" at the county fair, in a red, white, and blue vest and top hat, and doing this thing, and and then they put me on. I did some. There was some local channel programming, kind of a Woody's Toy Circus was he owned a toy store in town, and he had this show, and for some reason they got on it, and they put me on there, and I was singing "All I Want for Christmas is My Two Front Teeth," and I remember my mom literally drawing hieroglyphics to teach me the song. And so, all I want for Christmas, I don't want a fish, or I don't want a dog, or I don't want a horse, and that's how I learned to do this song, was by her little, before I could read, and practicing this song. And so they put me on stage, and I did this, and I had um, I performed in the local summer stock, park and recs, program. Uh, that was what was it called? It was called "Due to a Lack of Interest, Tomorrow Has Been Canceled." Was my first show, and then I got into high school. I don't remember performing much. I didn't. It wasn't something that I said, "Oh, I really want to perform." I just did when it occurred. And I got into high school, and I ended up in choir, and I really enjoyed it and had a good time with it. And um, uh, and then my senior year, I was in a smaller group within the choir. They had a madrigal group with 16 kids out of the full choir, where we sang, everything from the uh, harmonizing songs, and uh, male and 8 males, 8 females, and we do little dances and go to the local uh, places to perform. And then my senior year, I was in South Pacific, as my like spring of my senior year. I was in the South Pacific, and I was part of the choir background sailors in the show. And I remember one of my best friends from choir, a gal, was playing the main character. I forget her name. Um, and so I really wanted that lead of Emerald, I think is the male's name in that movie. And I got beat out by a foreign exchange student, and it just annoyed the heck out of me. But I loved performing, and I loved dancing. We had little dances that we did, and I think if I'd found that my freshman year, I probably would have been a theater kid. I just didn't. But it was like senior year, and then off to college, and all of that. And so I kind of, I didn't, after high school, I didn't really perform at all. I um, ended up getting a business degree, um, and eventually becoming an accountant out of college down in Los Angeles. And so, kind of my first act, so to speak, was was being an accountant. And I I'm surprised that I lived it as long as I did. Um, I had many different moments where I tried to get out of it, and then it just kind of like the Godfather would say, Al Pacino just kept sucking me back in. And it's that thing, because if it's hard to probably it's really hard to go, well, I could go do this, I could go be a counselor, but medical draws you back in because it's worth so much, it's so valuable, it's a good living, right? Same thing with accounting. I could go, I'm gonna for a period of time I was a commercial real estate, and I left accounting and I got into commercial real estate, and I started my own real estate company right at the height of the decline of the market, right? And and then I chose to give that up and go back to work so I could feed my family. And so anyway, that's kind of how I got there.
Yeah, I think I I think about this a lot with the whole fin- finances and literally feeding yourself. Like when you're an adult, you have adult responsibilities. And as much as I love acting in the arts and all that stuff, my adult responsibilities are still there. And it's okay to have something that provides financial freedom to cover the adult responsibilities, but also be an investor in my acting. And I think there is a bit of I hate to use the word guilt about that, because I worked damn hard to get where I am financially and academically. But I think there's huge value in that. And yeah, it's a temptress, right? Because it's hard to make money as an actor.
You're sitting there going, well, I could go do this for nothing, or I could go make money in the thing that I don't particularly enjoy, but I'm really good at, and
Yes.
and I feel very accomplished in it, but I really don't like doing it. So that kind of became, uh, you know, I kept circling back to it, during that time.
Yeah. How did you actually get into doing the Nutcracker? Like, how did that come about, and how did that decision get made in your mind to be like, yes, I accept?
Um, it really was a part. It's really my son's story. My oldest son with my ex-wife, is named Austin, and he, in his kindergarten class, they had some little talent show, and he wanted to dance in the show. And so he convinced some other kid in his class to dance with him, and they got up on stage and danced to this show. And it was kind of one of those, we come in and we're in the little gym there, and we're all sitting on, metal chairs and watching this thing, and he gets up, and the other kids just sort of, you know, dancing a little bit, and my son's boogieing around the stage. And we kind of said, well, I guess he's a dancer. Wow, that's cool. He was just having all this joy doing it. And about a year before that, he went to his mom took him to a show. I want to say it was a Princess and the Pea, local community show near our home. And he said something about, I'd really like to do that. That's kind of cool. But then we had settled back in our hometown of Bakersfield, and he had, I think they had started dance lessons, and they had gone to the studio's performance of the Nutcracker, and it was my wife and him and probably the other kids were there, but he watched the whole show, and he turned to her afterwards and said, I'm going to do that. I've got to do that. And she said, what? dance in the ballet? Yeah, there's not enough boys. And, because all the girls would play the boys' parts in the party scene and all this. And so, okay, so he got into it, and the other two younger kids started getting into it as well. And I want to say the next year he got a role in the show, and all three of my kids, my two boys and a girl, began dancing. And after a show or two, after a year or two of this, I realized we're going to be here a while. This is going to be something that we do, right? And we were doing swim team, and we were doing baseball and basketball league, and exposing the different things to see what was interesting to them. But dancing stuck. That was what they wanted to do. And so the guy that was doing the Nutcracker, or playing that part, um, was a guy that I um, knew, and he'd been doing it for 20 years, and his daughter was graduating that year, high school, and I figured, well, he must, probably give it up. And so I sort of just went to the studio owner and said, hey, I don't know if his name was Marvin. I don't know if Marvin's going to give this thing up, but if he does, I wouldn't mind, doing it. And I was doing karate at the time. I tried to get the kids into karate, and they did it for a little bit, but I really loved it. I was like, oh, I like this. This is fun. I'm going to keep doing this. And so I got a black belt, and they're like got about halfway through and bailed out, and I'm okay. Now I got to finish this. So I finished it, and then I got into Aikido, which is a different type of martial art, and so I was very used to using my body and moving and kicking and spinning and turning. So it wasn't like I just went straight into it and said, "Hey, I want to be a dancer." I could move, and so anyway, I volunteered. The next year, they gave me a tryout, and they put me in as a understudy. And then the next year, I was on stage, and so they gave me a couple performances, and we shared. And Marvin ended up hanging around for a few more years. So we shared the role for a couple of years, and then he kind of bowed out of most of the stuff and kept stayed on. And then I was the Nutcracker, and so that's kind of how I got started. And I was taking classes with my kids, and so the two boys would get in. They'd invite the two boys for partnering classes, and then they invite me, and so I'm there partnering with all the kids, young ladies that were in the class, and and working with some of the dance teachers as well. And and it just became what I was doing, and it was fun. It was a good time, more fun than I thought I could ever have. I mean, it was just a good time.
And what a cool thing to do with your kids. Like, not only like role modeling for your children, but role modeling for like other parents, I would think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess a lot of parents. I was always that person that I didn't mind. I never felt awkward in front of people on stage or speaking or performing. It felt natural, and But some people, they're like, wow, you're like fearless up there, and I'm like, well, you kind of gotta be, I don't want to look silly, so I gotta fully commit, and it. It was a lot of fun, I guess. And I kind of did it for them in the sense that I always said, well, if my kids, were going to play baseball, I'd be out there coaching baseball, or I'd be doing, showing up at the swim meets or the football games and trying to be involved somehow. And I just realized that was what we were going to do. So I wanted to be involved with them and what they were doing. And it was fun to do.
What is it about performing that you like, that you love, I would say?
Um, I think it's a little bit of the the joy of performing, of just doing something that's just free. You know, as an accountant and a financial analyst and a different roles that I've had in my career, um, it's so structured and so regimented, and you're always looking at. I always looked at yesterday. You know, as an accountant, you're looking at what happened yesterday, because you're not really doing too much budgeting or forecasting. At times, you're keeping track of what you made last year, or what the financial statement said last month, last week, last quarter. And so it just became um, this regimented life that when I was performing, I could be fully present in this moment and I could pretend to be something else. And lo and behold, I think I liked doing that. You know, I liked being a little goofy, and you can't be goofy in finance. You know, they begin to think that you know, you can't show up in a costume when you're, you know, an accountant. So I think that's it, kind of it.
Yeah, so what does life look like for you now? Are you still working as an accountant? Or have you shifted fully into acting? Or what does that look like now for you?
I'm working kind of as an analyst for. There was a period of time when I got out of accounting and I became a real estate broker, and um, and then went back and became an accountant again, an auditor. And when this happened, when I crashed and burned and rebooted, I decided, you know, I don't care what I do, but I'm not going to do that. I commit to myself that I'm not going to go be an accountant again. You know, I'm out. And so I'm kind of marrying the best of both worlds. I work for a commercial real estate company as a, you know, director of analysis, basically. So as as deals come up and um, needs analysis on those opportunities, I'm there creating spreadsheets and um, you know, pro formas to figure out, does this deal work? Does it make sense? How much is going to cost? What do we think we're going to make? Um, and then using some of my experience with larger companies to try and create some processes and improvements in what would be a small family business, and trying to, you know, elevate it a little bit in operations wise where I can and where it makes sense to do so. So that's kind of my day job, is analyzing real estate.
Do you notice you've pulled anything from your job currently or your work as an accountant into an acting career?
Um, I think uh, one of the things I think makes me possibly a good actor was something I read in, um, I forget the books, but it's basically that all all actors have an element of observation. So in order to become a character, you have to either know within yourself what that character is and have some connection to it, but you also are very observing. So you observe people and you mannerisms and what appears to be their motivation, and what, you know, what is this and what is that, and we become stores of moments, right? You watch somebody on the street and go, wow, that's an interesting person. Look at how they react, or how they're moving, or they're limping, or they're um, reacting to that person clerk in front of them. And I think I've taken that observational skill, that analysis skill that I have with numbers, and I've tended to take that into acting, to try and observing how to bring that thought into it. If that makes
I
sense.
think oh yeah. I love that, like, the honing of the moment, the observing of the moment. And I think that comes with like life experience as well too, right? Like you've experienced and observed, just by the nature of being on this earth for longer, you've observed people and stuff and felt things.
And live through them.
Yes.
You know, I'm not a great actor in the sense of knowing all the different techniques that are available to people, but we draw from our experience, and the more experience that we have, the pain that we feel, we can put into a character, and the joy that we felt in different moments, we can and we can bring that process forward into our character, and and become that, live that feeling again in some shape or form, or some essence of it. But also the things that we haven't necessarily lived, trying how do we observe those things in other people, and bring that into that role.
Yeah, and I think that when I talk to people who went to theater school, about what the advantages are, a lot of them speak to the technique, right? They learned Meisner, Uta Hagen, they read Chekhov and all this stuff, and can pick it out in different classical theater things, which is lovely. But I think that's great. But if you can't actually hone in a technique for yourself, it doesn't matter if you know the masters. Right? Like, I have the Janet McMorty technique of just having lived my life and witnessed life in front of me. And I'm not saying that there's one way that's better or worse or anything like that. I'm kind of jealous if people got to go to theater school. It sounds like it's a lot of fun. But yeah, I think that's great that you can label something, but if you can't feel it, it's just another academic exercise.
Yeah, from some of the acting coaches that I've learned from, it's your acting is not pretending, it's being, right? Mm-hmm. It's getting into that character and being that character, and whatever gets you there is your technique. And some people have had the benefit of years and years of classes, and some of us have to wing it, like, okay, I think this is it, and this, and by nature of being the second act of things. Mm-hmm. And I've done a little research, enough to know that my style is more along the lines of Meisner and his techniques, of not necessarily having to, become that. I don't think I could be a method actor. It's strange enough to live in my own head. I don't want to live in somebody else's for that long. So I like just being able to turn on that character and step into it for a moment, and then turn it off and get out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that also can come with, again, life experience, is recognizing what you need as a process. And everyone will tell you that their process is the best way and the only way and the true way and all that stuff. But I think the life experience gives us the advantage of saying, no, I know what works for me because I know what's in my head and I know who I am as a person. And this is what I need to flourish and be as authentic, genuine, and real as an actor. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you've noticed has surprised you about acting or the entertainment industry in general?
You know what's really surprises me about the entertainment business is as much of a process of years and years that it takes to get a movie made or a show made, and the amount of time that goes into the writing and the planning and the producing, that being the actor seems like the last step. you know, it. I I'm just surprised how I'll get a notification or I'll see something that says, I get it. Okay, you have an audition. Do a self tape, but it's got to be in 24 hours or 36 hours, like or tonight. Like, didn't aren't they? You know, can't they give you a day or two to think about it? You know, I, or and it just that's what surprises me, I guess, is that they bring the actors in almost at the last minute. Maybe the you know as you get towards the higher levels, you've got a job that starts way out there. But for the background and the little roles, it's just like, okay, we need somebody Saturday. Can we? This is Wednesday. Oh, gotta get somebody in. And it just seems like the actors are the last thing that gets thought about, um, or just how little time you have to try and do an audition. And get into that is the thing that surprises me the most. Having come
Yeah.
from this place where you got to plan your life, right? Right. We're planning our life. You've got to plan the work that's ahead of you. We're trying to plan for um, next month's vacation, all these things that we plan in life, and acting and auditions seem to be just this spur of the moment thing.
Yeah, and it's I agree. It's weird because like you're saying, nothing else about the product that's being created, the film, the television show or whatever, is like that. It's very planned out. And I think we as the actor think that everything revolves around us. We're the center of the solar system. When really it's brutally obvious when you're on set and everyone's like, nah, get out of the way, get out of the way. How you are just this little cog, an important one, an essential one, but a very small cog in a huge wheel.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
and and I saw that and learned that a lot when I was dealing with the Nutcracker,
Mm.
because I did it for 10 years, and there were hundreds of kids in this show, so they'd have a couple different casts so they'd have backups for different roles, and you just realize, yeah, I'm here. I'm just one performer in hundreds of performers that are all here, and even though the show is named after my particular character, it's really about all these kids, and it's just fun to be a part of that ensemble, and to have that valuable experience working with such a big group of people, and being appreciative of how well organized it is. And but even that, the auditions were in the summer for the December show, and so um, it becomes this thing that you're gearing up for, and then to go start auditioning, and you realize, wow, they're going to film on Saturday and they're auditioning for me today on Wednesday. Wow, that's really.
Yeah. Film and TV is a different beast, I find, than, well, not I find, I know, than compared to theater. And also, I find it's interesting because in theater, you kind of envelop and become more into the character because you can. You have this time and you're with this. I know the play that I just finished, like, you're with this character for so long because you're rehearsing and practicing and on stage, and it's organic and it's changing. And then like you get on set and you're like, okay, cool, here's this character that I've like developed and talked about and made, and she's a real human. And then they go, Okay, do your lines. Okay, ready, go. One take, you're done. Okay, bye.
Thank you. That was great.
Yeah, thank you. We're wrapped.
Wait, maybe could I try it one more time?
Okay.
Yeah.
But this person I created. And they're like, yeah, you're fine.
Thanks. It was great working with you.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Yeah, I had that with a little role. It was a student film I was working on, and I had one line. I was a coma patient, right? And I was in the bed and with my eyes closed, and I was supposed to wake up and say, you know, Adrian, whatever it is, and and we got to that, and I said it once, and they go, oh, okay, great, all right, we're cut, we're moving on. Like, could we try that again? I'm not sure that was the best one, but okay.
Yeah. You're like, all right. I remember, I think I was reading something about, I can't remember where it was from, but it was all about how when you're on the stage, you can kind of change things night to night, evolve the character, and it's all about you making the character the best, and you're in control of that. Where on film and television, you could just be standing there and the director would say your line exactly like I'm saying it, just repeat after me, Adrian, and you would go, Adrian. I'm like, okay, perfect, you're done. It's not your job to like make the character look good. They'll make you look good in like post and stuff, so it kind of takes, one, it can take the pressure off, but it also kind of takes the like power you have away, which can be frustrating. Yeah. Do you have any interesting on-set or on-stage stories?
Yeah. I one of my first real experience working on set was doing some background work in 2021, and it was for a movie that was by Damien Chazelle, I think, who did Whiplash and La La Land. I may have said his name wrong, but Damien.
Yeah.
And it was really the first big production post-COVID. And it comes out in December, I think, of this year. And it was 600 or 700 guys playing Crusader, dressed up in Crusader costumes. By the time this podcast airs, I think it will have been out. And it's called Babylon. But the 600 or 700 guys and gals, there was a few gals in there too, that were all dressed up, and it's a movie about the transition between talkies and silent movies, or silent to talkies. And we're the movie set, right? So it's a movie filming us making a movie. And it was middle of summer. We're in these huge, bulky costumes, and we're out in the middle of nowhere in Simi Valley, Los Angeles. And we're going out, and they'd go, okay, come on, all you guys, and we'd all march out onto the field, and then they'd set us up, and it'd take a half hour to get us all in position, and then they'd film us for a few times, and they go, okay, thanks, everybody back to the tents. And so we'd all walk back to the tents, and I've been on set a couple other places, and people are talking, they go, oh yeah, I was on this thing, and it's now sort of become this thing, like I survived that particular day. I was on the set just a month or so ago, and this guy's chatting over here, and he's, oh yeah, I was on this thing, and you go, oh, you were there too? I was there, yeah. Oh man, that was a hard day. What did he? Oh yeah, it was like 17 hours in 100-degree weather in those costumes, and so it's really this interesting looking back, on it, and meeting people on different sets. Yeah, I survived that. Man, it was crazy, wasn't it? Yeah, it really was.
This bonding experience. My oh yeah, my first on-set experience was, as background as well too, on it's already been released, but Nightmare Alley by Guillermo del Toro. And it was so cool. They had built this 1940s carnival, and my now good acting friend who I've had on this podcast, we met, and again we talk about these days that we had. We had like days and days of continuity where it was like fall in Canada, but they wanted it rainy. So they had rain machines on us for days and days. We had like heat pack, those like shaking heat packs that you put in your gloves, like stuck to our bodies, but we had to still look like we were in the fall and we're in 1940s costumes. So they'd had these like things to like wrap around us to stay warm, and then they'd say, "Kate, we're gonna be shooting," and you take all these off, and you're like, "Oh, it's so cold."
Like a shivering dog, you know?
Oh yeah, and people who were on that set, again, we'll talk about that for years. It was an amazing experience. People were so nice, but you're like, "Do you remember that week when we got rained on back in the day?"
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was, you know, it was a neat experience that I'll look back on. And there was an interesting part about that. It was my first time on set, and when I first got it, this is a tie-in between the first act and the second act. So this is a one of those unique coincidences of life, right? Synchronicities of life. When I got out of college, I was working in LA in an area called Woodland Hills for a big accounting firm. So there's Deloitte and Touche was the firm. I think they're just called Deloitte now. And it was right after they merged. So back in the early 90s, there was a big, it was like 8 accounting firms that were huge, and then they merged, and there was 6 or 4. And it was right after these two, Deloitte and Touche, had merged. And 6 months in, I get laid off because they had the best recruiting year ever, and it was in the middle of a recession in Los Angeles, and they laid off like 10% of the LA staff, right? Mm-hmm. And I was one of those guys who was in a little office, and they laid off like a manager and a senior and a junior that I was. And there was only like 3 or 4 new hires that year, so it was like eeny, meeny, miny, moe, and I got kicked. But the day that I got laid off, I was at a client up in Simi Valley, and it was up on this ranch where we filmed. So literally I got called from this client's office. I drove out of that office, turned the corner, went down into Simi Valley, went back to my office, and got laid off. And then I ended up working for Sony Pictures as an accountant and a couple different things. But when I went to the set, this is my first day first day on set for this movie. I literally drove that same road back up and said, "There's the client. There's the sign for the client that I got laid off." And I drove back into this same place where I got laid off. You know, I left the accounting their accounting office, and I'm driving back on 30 plus years later onto this place called Big Sky Ranch. And a few miles back in, I'm like, wow, that is just the oddest thing. My first day as an actor was one of the last days as an auditor that I was working for Deloitte and Touche. And it was this weird synchronicity of life.
Wow. That like gave me a little kind of chills. I love that because I think it's kind of, I love that word synchronicity. I'm not a big like kind of frou-frou, but like these things happen more often than I ever thought. And then when I hear stories of it, I'm like, yeah, there we go. It's like fate, karma, synchronicity, whatever you want to call it. I love that.
Yeah, I really, I've become more and more appreciative of how the universe works, I guess, and how it can how God, source, force, higher power, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
has a little bit of a humor to it. You know, your spirit guides are like, oh, this is gonna crack him up. Let's do this. You know,
Here's
and
the comedy brain. He deserves one.
yeah, and so I've really things like that where I just stop and go, wow, that's really really interesting. And well, thank you. That's a neat sign from the universe that I think I'm on the right road on this. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have anything that you're looking forward to coming up?
I actually that movie Babylon. I was on set for several days. There was those 2 days of filming, and there was another 2 days where they were doing a premiere, and I was in a theater. And that one, um, they stuck me out front as a reporter, and so I wasn't just one of the masses in the theater. I had a special another costume they threw me in, and so there's a couple scenes there that I'm pretty sure my mug will get some pretty good face time, right? Pretty sure, because the, the the part that they were filming, I was right there, you know, and big widescreen right in the middle, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that turns out. It was a scene with Eric Roberts and Margot Robbie. Was in it. So was Brad Pitt, but he wasn't in that particular scene, but he was there. Um, and so that's coming out in December of 2022, and I'm looking forward to that and seeing how it turned out. I had my big first on-screen moment was just recently. I was I did it 6 months ago. Um, I was a gangster in the Columbo crime family in the Paramount show The Offer about the making of The Godfather.
Oh, I've heard about this.
Yeah, I'm a big Godfather fan myself. And I I was, in these background things, you never know what's going to happen, right? You're out there and they go, hey, we need somebody to do this, and they'll grab somebody that's closest to them, and they'll throw them into that particular thing. And this was I I was just a theater goer as a crime family. What the story was that when they made the movie, they needed the crime family's blessing, and they all wanted to come to the premiere, and they couldn't have the gangsters coming to the Hollywood premiere or the New York City premiere, and so they set them up in a theater and gave them their own screening of the movie. And so that was this particular scene of all the gangsters coming in and in the theater. And so they pile us all in. We go and sit down, pick a seat, and then the director comes out, and the assistant director and the assistant director, and they're all standing there, and they're all, okay, let's move this guy over there and this guy over here. And, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't work. Let's move him over here. And they're kind of mix and matching costumes and people and male and female, and somehow I end up right down front, sitting next to the crime boss with smiling and elbowing him, and and I got a brief moment on screen, so I'm like, hey, there I am.
Awesome. That's so cool. I'm gonna watch it. I gotta watch that. Keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, when you see it, I'm it's right when the Godfather gets shot and we all react, and I had this great reaction moment. Oh, God.
That's great. My last question is a bit of a loaded one. This is like no pressure. Do you have any advice for people who are thinking about going into this career or wanting a shift or a reboot?
I'd say there's, if you really want to do it, you got to really want to do it. And that sounds sort of, uh, I don't know if that sounds circular, but um, it's not a friendly profession for the faint of heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought it was the rejection part of it, like that from an outside looking in, you think, oh, I wouldn't want to do that because you get rejected all the time. Well, I don't know. But at least in this day and age, you don't even get rejected. You just get ignored, right? You send in an audition and you don't even know if they watched it. You don't know if it went in. You don't know, but it's just more of you've got to be prepared mentally that you're just gonna keep going. It's sort of like a few years back, I climbed Mount Whitney. I was listening to one of your podcasts. There was another guy on here that did that as well. But I climbed Mount Whitney, and it was a great lesson. I actually wrote a few pieces on it. And it was a great day to just climb this, climbing from 8,000 feet up to 14,000 feet. And you can't think about the end. You just got to think about the next step, the next, just one foot in front of the other. And right near one of the last things you do is or the major part of this climb is climbing, up the hill on, they call 99 switchbacks, where you're just going back and forth up this hill. And you can't think about how far up you are or how far more you have to go. You just got to keep stepping. And that's what this profession feels like. You just choose that you're going to go there and just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And eventually you or I or anybody else will get a break, and you'll get a role that becomes the step to the next role, which becomes the meeting to the next person. And that's been my experience as it relates to how my walk has been. And I'm at the beginning still, and I have to remind myself every day of that. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and eventually it'll get there. And do what you have to do to keep yourself motivated to keep going. And it's okay for those moments when you don't feel it, to just let that come upon you and proceed out.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you, Scott, for sharing your story with us. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable. Just an absolute joy to talk to. I hope you will all tune in next week for another episode of Second Act Actors, and buy some merch, support charities, do some good in this crazy world. I hope you'll tune in next week. Bye.